This is the story of he trusted his business partner, until the janitor handed the black millionaire a hidden folder as it truly unfolded. Marcus Washington had built his empire from nothing, and every morning when he walked through the glass doors of Washington Tech Solutions, he felt the weight of that journey in his chest. The marble floors reflected the early sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the lobby where his company's logo gleamed in brushed steel. 20 years ago, he'd been coding in his grandmother's basement, surviving on instant ramen and determination. Now, at 45, he employed over 300 people and his software had revolutionized supply chain management across 3 continents. But success, Marcus had learned, came with its own shadows. If stories like this resonate with you, feel free to subscribe so we can keep walking through these shadows together, because what happened next would shake the foundation of everything Marcus thought he knew about trust. The elevator hummed as it carried him to the 20th floor, where his corner office overlooked the Seattle skyline. Through the glass walls, he could see his employees already at their desks, the soft blue glow of monitors painting their faces in concentration. This was his family, his legacy. Every person in this building existed because he'd refused to give up when venture capitalists told him that someone like him wasn't cut out for tech leadership. "Morning, Mr. Washington." Sarah Chen, his assistant, handed him his usual black coffee and a tablet displaying his schedule. David's already in the conference room reviewing the Meridian contracts. David Kellerman, his business partner, his closest friend, the man who'd believed in him when others wouldn't. They'd met at Stanford's MBA program, 2 ambitious outsiders who'd bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of changing the world. David had been the first to invest when Marcus pitched his initial software concept, and for 15 years, they'd built this company together. David handled operations and client relations while Marcus focused on innovation and product development. It was a partnership that had made them both wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. Marcus pushed open the conference room door to find David hunched over a stack of papers, his blonde hair catching the morning light. At 43, David still carried himself with the easy confidence that had made him popular in business school, though Marcus noticed the stress lines around his eyes had deepened lately. "The Meridian deal," David said without looking up. "It's more complex than we thought. Their integration requirements are going to need significant customization." Marcus settled into the leather chair across from him, studying his partner's face. Meridian Industries was their biggest potential client yet, a multinational corporation whose contract would triple their revenue overnight. They'd been courting this deal for 8 months, and it was finally within reach. "Complex how?" Marcus asked, though something in David's tone made the coffee taste bitter in his mouth. "They want exclusive licensing for the Asian markets, complete control over distribution and modification rights." David's fingers drummed against the mahogany table, a nervous habit Marcus had noticed increasing over the past few weeks. It's actually a good deal. Better than good. It's transformative." The way David said transformative and carried weight that settled uncomfortably in Marcus's stomach. In 15 years of partnership, he'd learned to read the subtle shifts in his friend's voice, and this felt different, urgent, almost desperate. "Wait, what aren't you telling me?" Marcus leaned forward, his reflection multiplying in the polished surface of the table. David finally looked up, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something flicker across his partner's face. Fear? Guilt? It vanished so quickly he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. "I'm telling you everything, Marcus. This is our shot at the big leagues. Meridian wants to move fast, though. They need an answer by Friday. Friday, 3 days away." Marcus had built his company on careful deliberation, on understanding every angle before making major decisions. This felt rushed, pressured in a way that made his instincts prickle with unease. The morning dissolved into meetings, presentations, and the familiar rhythm of running a growing company. But throughout the day, Marcus found his attention drifting to small details that felt wrong. David's phone buzzed constantly, and each time he glanced at it, his jaw tightened. During their lunch meeting with the marketing team, David seemed distracted, his responses just a beat too slow, his smile just a shade too forced. It was nearly 7 p.m. when Marcus finally returned to his office, the building mostly empty except for the cleaning crew, and a few dedicated programmers burning the midnight oil. The Seattle skyline twinkled beyond his windows, city lights reflecting off Elliott Bay in the distance. He'd always found peace in this view, but tonight it felt hollow. A soft knock on his door interrupted his brooding. Come in." To his surprise, it was Miguel Santos, the night janitor. Miguel had been with the company for 8 years, a quiet man in his 60s who spoke broken English but had a gentle smile for everyone. Marcus made it a point to learn the names of all his employees, from the C-suite to the custodial staff, and Miguel had always impressed him with his work ethic and discretion. "Mr. Washington," Miguel said, his weathered hands clutching a manila folder. I find this in trash in Mr. Kellerman's office." His accent was thick, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent. I think you should see." Marcus accepted the folder, noting how Miguel's hands trembled slightly. Inside were photocopied documents, financial statements, and what appeared to be correspondence between David and Meridian Industries. But as Marcus began to read, his blood turned to ice. The first document was a private agreement between David Kellerman and Meridian's CEO, dated 3 months ago. It outlined a plan to acquire Washington Tech Solutions through a leveraged buyout, with David receiving a substantial payout and a position as regional director. The second document detailed how the Meridian contract was structured to create dependency, making the company vulnerable to acquisition within 18 months. But it was the third document that made Marcus's hands shake. It was a detailed analysis of the company's intellectual property, including proprietary algorithms that Marcus had developed personally, algorithms that were supposed to be protected by the strictest confidentiality agreements. Someone had been feeding Meridian inside information for months. Miguel," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where exactly did you find this?" "In shredder basket. Papers were, how you say, jammed. Machine no work. I fix and papers fall out." Miguel's eyes were filled with concern. "Mr. Kellerman, he stayed very late last night, very upset, throwing many papers away." The building seemed to hold its breath around them. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see the empty cubicles, the darkened conference rooms, the empire he'd built now feeling as fragile as spun glass. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed, had been systematically undermined by the person he trusted most. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in this moment, because what Marcus discovered next would challenge everything he believed about loyalty, friendship, and justice. Marcus spent the night in his office, poring over every detail of the documents Miguel had recovered. By dawn, he'd pieced together a conspiracy that went deeper than simple corporate betrayal. David hadn't just been planning to sell the company. He'd been systematically positioning Marcus for failure, creating scenarios where the board would lose confidence in his leadership while positioning himself as the stable alternative. The Meridian deal wasn't just about money. It was about erasing Marcus from his own story. As the sun rose over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't confront David directly. Instead, he would give his partner exactly what he wanted, but on terms David would never see coming. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. David was already there, of course, probably destroying more evidence or coordinating with his contacts at Meridian. When Marcus knocked on his partner's door, David looked up with what appeared to be genuine relief. "Marcus, perfect timing. I've been thinking about the Meridian contract all night. I really think we should move forward." "Actually," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from David's desk, "I've been thinking the same thing. Let's do it." David blinked, clearly surprised by the lack of resistance. "Really? Just like that? Just like that?" "You're right, David. This is our shot at the big leagues. I trust your judgment." Marcus let the word trust hang in the air between them, watching as David's face cycled through relief, confusion, and something that might have been guilt. "Great. That's great, Marcus. I'll call Meridian this morning and let them know we're moving forward. Actually, I'd like to handle the final negotiations myself. As CEO, I think it's important that I be the face of this deal." Marcus stood, straightening his jacket. "Can you have all the contract details sent to my office? I want to review everything one more time before we sign." For just a moment, panic flashed across David's features. "Marcus, I don't think that's necessary. I've already reviewed everything thoroughly." "I'm sure you have, but humor me. You know how I like to dot every I and cross every T." David nodded slowly, but Marcus could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. His partner was already calculating, already planning his next move. It would be his last. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus worked with a precision that would have made his grandmother proud. She'd been a chess player, had taught him that the most powerful moves were often the ones your opponent never saw coming. He contacted his personal attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres who specialized in corporate law and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients. He also reached out to James Mitchell, a private investigator who'd helped him with due diligence on previous acquisitions. Within 24 hours, James had uncovered a paper trail that revealed the full scope of David's betrayal. Bank records showing payments from Meridian to a consulting company David had secretly established. Email communications between David and Meridian executives dating back 6 months. Most damning of all, evidence that David had been sharing proprietary information in violation of his fiduciary duties as a partner and board member. But Marcus's masterstroke was what he did next. Instead of exposing David immediately, he used his partner's own strategy against him. Marcus scheduled a board meeting for Friday morning, ostensibly to approve the Meridian deal. He invited Meridian's executives to attend virtually, telling them he wanted to personally thank them for their partnership. David was thrilled, believing he was about to witness the culmination of his months of planning. What David didn't know was that Marcus had also invited the FBI. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, Seattle's typical autumn weather casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The boardroom filled with the company's 7 board members, all successful business leaders who'd invested in Marcus's vision over the years. David sat at his usual place, confident and relaxed, occasionally checking his phone with barely concealed excitement. At exactly 9 a.m., Marcus stood at the head of the polished conference table, the Seattle skyline visible through the windows behind him. On the wall-mounted screen, 3 Meridian executives appeared via video conference, their faces professional, but eager. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority he'd earned through 2 decades of leadership. "Today, we're here to discuss a partnership that could transform our company's future." David smiled, probably thinking about his payout, about his new position, about how he'd finally stepped out of Marcus's shadow. But before we proceed," Marcus continued, "I think it's important that we all understand exactly what kind of partnership we're entering into." He clicked a remote, and the screen split to show the Meridian executives on one side and a document on the other. It was the secret agreement between David and Meridian, the one Miguel had rescued from the shredder. The silence in the room was deafening. David's face went white, then red, then white again. On the screen, the Meridian executives looked confused, then alarmed as they realized what they were seeing. "This document," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions in his chest, "outlines a plan to systematically undermine Washington Tech Solutions and force a leveraged buyout. It details how proprietary information was shared without authorization, how board decisions were influenced through deception, and how our partnership was used as a weapon against the very company we built together." David shot to his feet. "Marcus, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Marcus's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I understand that my business partner, my friend, the man I trusted with my life's work, has been systematically betraying me for months. I understand that you've violated your fiduciary duties, breached confidentiality agreements, and committed what amounts to corporate espionage." The boardroom door opened, and 2 FBI agents entered, their badges clearly visible. David's legs seemed to give out, and he collapsed back into his chair. "David Kellerman," one of the agents said, "you're under arrest for corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." As the agents read David his rights, Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Not just anger or betrayal, but a profound sadness for the friendship they'd shared, for the dreams they'd built together, for the man David had chosen to become. The Meridian executives had already disconnected from the call. In the aftermath, as the boardroom emptied and David was led away in handcuffs, Marcus found himself alone with the weight of what had just happened. He'd saved his company, protected his employees, and ensured that justice was served. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the loss of someone he'd considered a brother. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Miguel Santos stood in the doorway, his custodial cart beside him, his weathered face filled with concern. "Mr. Washington? You okay?" Marcus looked at this man who'd worked quietly in the shadows for 8 years, who'd noticed what others missed, who'd had the courage to speak up when it mattered most. Miguel, who cleaned offices and emptied trash cans, had saved a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Miguel, Marcus said, standing and walking over to the janitor. How would you like a promotion? Miguel's eyes widened. Sir, head of internal security. 60,000 a year to start, full benefits, and a corner office. Your job would be to notice things, to keep your eyes open, to make sure this never happens again. Tears filled Miguel's eyes. Mr. Washington, I don't know what to say. Say yes. And Miguel, thank you. You saved more than just a company today. You saved the dreams of 300 families who depend on this place for their livelihoods. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same boardroom, but everything had changed. The company had not only survived David's betrayal but had grown stronger. The attempted acquisition had failed, but the publicity around the case had actually enhanced Washington Tech Solutions' reputation. Clients admired Marcus's integrity and the loyalty of his employees. New partnerships had emerged, better than anything Meridian could have offered. David was serving 18 months in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his future in the tech industry over. Marcus felt no satisfaction in his former partner's downfall, only a deep sadness for what might have been. Miguel Santos now occupied an office 3 doors down from Marcus's, and his keen eye for detail had already prevented 2 smaller incidents of corporate espionage. He'd also started an employee recognition program that had boosted morale throughout the company. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The betrayal had taught him that trust wasn't about blind faith. It was about creating systems and cultures where integrity was rewarded and deception was impossible to hide. He'd implemented new transparency measures, regular audits, and most importantly, he'd learned to listen to voices from every level of his organization. As Marcus watched the sunset paint the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and crimson, he thought about the lessons his grandmother had taught him about chess. Sometimes the most powerful piece on the board wasn't the queen or the king, but the humble pawn who saw everything and had the courage to move when it mattered most. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, who was starting her freshman year at Stanford. She was studying computer science, inspired by her father's journey and determined to build her own legacy. The message was simple. I'm proud of you, Dad. Can't wait to work with you someday. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. The future stretched ahead of him, full of possibility and promise. He'd learned that success wasn't just about building something great. It was about building something that could survive betrayal, grow stronger from adversity, and continue to serve others long after its founder was gone. The janitor had handed him more than just a folder that night. Miguel had given him the chance to choose who he wanted to be in his darkest moment, and Marcus had chosen to be someone worthy of the trust that so many people had placed in him. If this ending brought you a bit of hope, share it with someone who needs it, because sometimes the most profound changes come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people we least expect to notice are the ones who see everything most clearly. In the end, Marcus Washington's empire stood not because it was built on trust alone, but because it was built on the courage to act when trust was broken, the wisdom to learn from betrayal, and the strength to build something better from the ashes of what was lost. The shadows had revealed the light, and the light had shown him the way home.